Well, I have very strong views on it, because when I talked about volcanic behaviour, and some of that might have been lost over time, but volcanic behaviour was about the fact that these young men live a very, very disciplined life for the majority of the year. And when the discipline isn't in place, like in the off-season or the pre-season or when we have particular breaks, that lack of discipline shows us in the testing that that's when the majority of positive tests and the bad decision making occurs. If you look at the timing of when Josh and Lockie made these decisions, it was during that period where there wasn't the same sort of discipline and structure in their lives. And again, it continues to come through in the information from the AFL. So it's not my opinion, it's real, it's part of the battle. And in the same way it's part of the battle, I believe it's the area that we should target when we look for problems. Because I don't want to be sitting here again. I don't want to be solving problems. As a club, we're putting to the AFL and the Players Association, we want to be preventing these issues. It's not good for the club or the industry to be going through this again. There's no doubt that there's reputational damage done by the whole process. This is not ideal. It contradicts the zero tolerance and culture that we're trying to create. It contradicts all the good behaviours and good decision making that is made by this group of fine young men that we have on our list. So it compromises a whole lot of things, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's going to knock us over. This is something as a club we need to deal with and be better and stronger as a result. We continue to have conversations with our entire player group, and part of that, there's a whole range of conversations. But again, it's really important that we see that this was two players that have actually made a poor decision in amongst a group that's very committed, are very disciplined, are very focused on what they're trying to achieve. And we're really proud of the group, of the programs we've got in place, the education. One of the things is, you, as a club, sometimes when these things happen, you question yourself, and we've been back to the leadership group and we're going, are we doing enough? Is this message clear enough? And just overwhelmingly the players have said what we've got in place is exactly what we need to be doing, but can we ever guarantee and remove the decision making of one or two individuals? And we can't. So that's why we're not ever going to nail this and sort it out. This is an ongoing challenge for this club, so we'll continue to conduct ourselves how we are now. I have no problems with the ASADA process or sanctions, and they've got to be extreme. Like, they're in place in Australian sport, in world sport, to maintain the integrity, and so everything that we've seen is certainly, you don't want to be part of some of the conversations that we were part of, but everything that we've seen is appropriate, and we don't have any problems with that.
Yeah, I think the unusual nature of it is what strikes us, is that it is the irony of it is probably what's made it more complicated, because our first reaction would be, if our players are taking performance-enhancing drugs, I think they're kind of on their own. I don't think you would see this kind of response and support for the young men, unless they didn't know what they were doing. So I think that's the unusual nature of this. So we had to work through and go, okay, I know that's what it looks like, but what is it really? How should we treat this from our members' point of view? How do we show that we are serious about the war against drugs, if you like? And I think we do that, but then we say, okay, what should we do with these young men? Where are they really within this? And I think we've struck up a reasonable balance. And I think the feedback that we've got, because it's been quite a lengthy process, is that most people kind of see where we're coming from. We need to be hard on it, but we also need to at least be, we've actually been a lot warmer to the young men than people realise, because they haven't been able to come in, but we've had all of our people from outside, the welfare people, etc., making sure they're okay, the players still have the relationship with them. So I think we've had to balance those two things, and I hope I'm pretty sure we will get a really good outcome from the young men, regardless of whether they play footy again. I think they get that it's an enormous lesson, a life lesson for them, and I think we'll get a pretty good outcome from it, as unpleasant as it's been. The penalty for doing what they're doing, even if they took clenbuterol purposefully all they get is 2 years, and that's what they've got. So the penalty, it's a bit like, you can only be done once.
You're saying the penalty outweighs the crime,
No. I'm saying, well, in a sense, their crime wasn't to take clenbuterol because they had no idea they were taking clenbuterol. But illicit, well, what's the penalty for taking an illicit drug?
Well, you tell me.
Well, I tell you what it is. It's one strike. We don't even know, and the doctor knows, and it is not a great penalty in that sense. And that's our argument, is that we need to, and we don't, as a club, we don't even get to know, we don't get to buy into, we don't get to help the young men in that case. And whilst we understand the need for welfare within, if there's some drug taken, there may be some need for welfare, but most times it's not. If it's just this recreational drug that we're talking about, we don't even get to know about it. So that's what we're saying. There probably does need to be some sort of change. And the AFL are very aware of it, and they're working through it at the moment. We think that the club should be more involved, we think, in helping young men who do have that recreational drug issue. That's where we are as well. I know we don't call it. I'm just saying that's what it is. It's a party drug. It's a recreational drug. It's an illicit drug. It's not a performance enhancing drug. It's a totally different thing. But because clearly there was clenbuterol somewhere, and I assume it was in an illicit drug, that's what they've been caught for. Because by pure chance, in a sense, they were tested by Asada rather than Dorovich. I mean, that's the kind of the irony of it, is where we are. And we're not making light of any of it. But that's what we've had to deal with.
Well, so I'm part of the working party with the AFL on establishing that, and I don't want to throw up my opinions because we have expert advice that feeds into that group. But if I was to give a response, I would say whatever's required, we have to find out whatever is required, and a lot of that is going to be uncomfortable. And it needs to be uncomfortable, whatever's required. So when these young men are at a point where they've got the option or the choice to take illicit drugs, we need to have it at a point that every single one of them goes, no, the consequences are too big, and therefore I'm going to say no. So I'm not going to sit here and go, that's an easy answer and we can eliminate this whole problem here today. But we need to continue to work with experts. But right at the moment, we forget that the industry has a policy that's a medical policy. It was designed to identify players that might have medical issues, and we need to identify it so that we can give them care. That's what the industry signed off. But it needs more, because now we're starting to see that is definitely the exception to the rule, not the rule. The vast majority, if not 99%, are just men making bad decisions that have nothing to do with welfare issues. So we need to understand that's the role the policy plays and put in place the elements. Again, like I said, it's as simple as this. They've got to get to a point where they make a choice and they go, no, consequences are too big. Well, I personally think it is, because it's not getting the results that we want. And when I sit down with two young men, like we've got here today, and they say things like, well, when we had the choice to make a decision on whether we took illicit drugs or not, and we thought about the fact that in a worst case scenario you get a strike and it's anonymous and no one knows, and that clearly wasn't enough for them to say no, otherwise we wouldn't be dealing with this, then I go, no, it's not having a big enough impact. It's failing the players and therefore failing the clubs, because this is about the players but it also is about the club. We ended up with 2 less players on our list that were still playing, so it takes up our salary cap. We've had to go through this all year. It's shown amazing leadership, I think, for this club to be able to separate such a major issue out and still. And we said right up front to Nathan and the players, you concentrate on going out and winning games of footy, and we'll continue to manage this over here. But it takes a lot of time and resources. So I think it's failing the industry, the clubs and the players. So in the conversations, they didn't sit down and say specifically, when we talk to them about the policy, they talk about the fact that this is how the players process it. They sit down and they go, all right, we've got to make the decision, what is at stake here, and the way they process is exactly like what I just said then. They look at the consequences, and those consequences aren't enough to actually walk away. And you know the numbers in the industry and broader in Australian sport. That's a lot of people that it's not enough of a deterrent for, as far as I'm concerned. Well, as you can understand, this is an amazingly difficult day that they asked for. They said that they wanted to come and talk to the players, they wanted to come and talk to the board and apologise and restate their commitment. They wanted to come and talk to the media because they know it's their chance to talk to all the Collingwood supporters and the broader industry. And with such a sensitive issue and where they're at personally, to be able to read a statement rather than handle a series of questions. If they end up back in football, I'm sure there'll be times where they're going to have to answer questions on it, but not today.
Josh's motivation, Wayne, it's been speculated that he's pretty keen to pursue football, but Josh is a bit unsure. Can you provide what they're thinking?
As of an hour ago, chatting to the players, I mean, I've heard rumours like that. Every conversation we've had with the players is they want to redeem themselves, they want to rebuild their careers, they want to get their bodies and minds right and have themselves set for in 18 months' time. These are two young men that have got something to prove, so I haven't detected one element of that at all. I would say that there's a good chance because the policy hasn't been readdressed and changed. What they've said is the AFL and the Players Association have come out, I think, and said, yes, we need to review it, but I want to see the results of that review. I want to see a policy that we're all happy with. For the clubs, the Players Association, the AFL, everyone's happy with. Right at the moment, I would say I think the Players and the Players Association are happy with it. We certainly aren't, and I don't think it's getting the results. So I won't answer that question on where this has taken us until we see the end result. But it certainly changed the language and changed the thinking of the key leaders, including the players in the industry, because the conversations I've had now are completely different in the last 6 months to what they were prior.
It's interesting that the players' involvement is still voluntary, from the Players Association. So. But I think they're probably feeling as strongly about it as we are, I would think.
Well, so just the mood in the room when the two boys are present playing, was it one of support? Was there
Yes, yeah.
There that sort of,
No,
he talks about, playing sorry, that money, all that sort of stuff.
No, I think they've been, because there's been a fair bit of time ago, I think they've all spoken to each other reasonably regularly. So there was quite a bit of support. I think. Well, that's what it felt like. Certainly felt like to me. I think they feel for them, but again, I think the good point is what Gary made, that we don't feel as though the boys are feeling sorry for themselves. I think they do understand and they accept, and they've been very strong about moving on. They've got to deal with it and make the best out of a bad position. I think their players would support, their mates support them on that.